Joining us now, John Dean, former counsel to President Nixon and author of the new book, The Nixon Defense: What He Knew and When He Knew It. John Dean, thank you for joining us here today on America's Forum.
Hi, JD. How are you?
Doing fine, sir. Really appreciate your time, and let's get right to the question that you have right there in the title. What did the president know, and when did he know it in terms of criminality or responsibility in Watergate?
Well, he had less at the outset than we thought he did, and more at the end than he ever admitted. Is the soundbite answer. What I've done, as you know, is I have transcribed all of his Watergate conversations to see how it all falls out, and that is an overview.
And the overview, as I was reading the book and some of your notes on it, it was a fairly painstaking, time-taking process. What makes...
Oh boy.
That's an understatement, I guess. You look back on that, how much work did you have to devote, and what helped you technically in terms of listening to the fidelity of those tapes, given today's technology?
JD, what I did first is I went in and discovered no one had ever cataloged those conversations. The National Archives has done a remarkably good job of just going through all of the conversations. They've withdrawn national security matters, they've withdrawn personal matters, and in the process, they prepared subject logs for every conversation. These are all virtually online now at the Nixon Library, so anybody can go in and look at them. The time I did, they were not digital. I was way ahead of them. So once I identified the conversations, I discovered there were about 1,000 of them. I then looked to see how many people or who else might have transcribed them, and found that there were partial transcripts of about 400 conversations, ballpark. But I needed more than partial transcripts. I wanted to understand, what he knew and when he knew it every day, and how this thing had unfolded, so I could better understand the whole crisis that he confronted. In doing that, what I did is I hired a evolving team of grad students. I was fortunate to find one legal secretary who was working on a PhD in archival science, who did 500 of the conversations for me. I found about 600 conversations that nobody outside the archives had ever, to the best I can tell, ever even listened to. So there was a lot of new material as well. I did it chronologically. I kept them in front of me, and it was notwithstanding the fact I was there and lived through it. Every page of that book has something I didn't know before.
Well, a couple of things in terms of the public mindset, John, and what we remember of history. The 18.5-minute gap on the tape. From what you've been able to reconstruct, what did that gap include, and is it as dramatic as all the speculation surrounding that gap?
It is not. When you take it, it is really kind of a minor historical matter. It has really no historical significance whatsoever. Who did it is not as important as what was done. I'm able to get it down to the 6 people who had access to the tape at the right time to do it, if so inclined, but I can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt who did it. And unless somebody confesses, nobody else can. So that's, as I say, you can get it down to 6 people, some of whom are recognized, like Richard Nixon, Al Haig, the former chief of staff. Most are not known, but still they could have done it. So what was erased? When you look at the sequence of events of when this came up, it's after the so-called Saturday Night Massacre, when Nixon has fired Special Prosecutor Cox. It's after he is committed to start turning over information. It's after he has started indicating already some of the requested material is not available. And then the final straw that breaks the camel's back is when he goes in, sends his lawyer into court and says, yes, and Here's another one that has an 18.5-minute gap. Now, the first thing I found out, a friend of mine who got very interested in this and did research, got a hold of one of the few engineers for the machine that the court established clearly had done the eraser, the experts that they'd retained. And this guy was scheduled to testify, and then Nixon resigned, and the prosecutors largely dropped their pursuit of this matter. But anyway, this attorney friend of mine interviewed this engineer and found out that Rosemary Woods, who thought she had erased at least 5 minutes of it, if not, and Al Haig thought she'd erased all of it, excuse me, could not physically and mechanically have done it in any of the ways she explained. This engineer, it was a German machine, the year 5000. There were very few of them in the United States. He was one of the few technicians, and he said the machine was designed in a fashion that the way she did it could not mechanically be accomplished. You just could not erase something that way. He went into a lot of technical material that I just summarized in this appendix. So what was erased? Well, it's clear that Nixon, after he establishes his final defense that he knew nothing of the Watergate cover-up until I had told him on March 21st of 1973, and the tape they're seeking that has the 18.5-minute gap is the first day he's back after the arrest at the Watergate way back in June of 72, June 20th, the first morning conversation. Well, it's clear that they were talking about the cover-up. And that was what was erased. There was a lot of speculation at the time that this first conversation might have been talking about how they, the foiled, they had been behind somehow the Watergate break-in and things of that matter. Not true. When you listen to all these conversations, you know the range of knowledge that the people had.
And we were talking about that earlier. It was interesting to me, and I commented on it. Mark Felt, a.k.a. Deep Throat, while his identity was made known and the public perception of Mark Felt as a crusader to save the Republic, his reputation somewhat unsavory, both in the FBI and certainly with the Nixon people who discovered he was leaking, in fact, correct?
Yes, indeed. As the book reports, I learned from the head of the criminal division, Henry Peterson, that the general counsel of one of the news organizations to which Felt was leaking came in to protect the client, the news organization, because they were worried about some of the information Felt was giving them. It might be grand jury, they might be obstructing justice, all kinds of problems. So Peterson said, I haven't told the Attorney General, who at that time was Richard Kleindienst, I haven't told the acting director of the FBI, Pat Gray, because I don't, I'm afraid that they'll only exacerbate the problem. But I do think the White House should know. So I go back and report that to Haldeman, and Haldeman in turn reports it to the president. The president, he'll later confront Pat Gray when he nominates him for the FBI with this fact, and Gray doesn't believe him. What will happen also is the final twist in the Mark Felt story. Incidentally, he was described to me by Henry Peterson as known in the FBI as the White Rat because of his premature white hair, and that he was always talking to the news media in a way he wasn't supposed to be. But anyway, the final twist comes when all is said and done, and Felt himself is indicted for authorizing an unlawful entry, and he drags Pat Gray in as authorizing him to do so when it hadn't happened.
And all because Felt wanted to be the FBI director primarily. That's what motivated him?
He did. He was trying to do anything he could to embarrass Gray. There was a group of former J. Edgar Hoover people there who were frightful of outsiders coming in and finding out what all they'd done. They wanted to keep it
inside. Hey, John, time is running scarce. Will you come back and visit with us again? Because there have been some critics who've appeared with us, and we want to have you back because you've gotten some criticism during this program we'd like you to be able to respond to, and sadly, we don't have the time right now. John Dean, we thank you for the time you've given us. We look forward to your next visit. John Dean, author of The Nixon Defense, what he knew and when he knew it. And we do hope to have him back because it's a big book covering an important subject. Coming up on America's Forum, a ruling made in a lawsuit against the IRS. It's a setback for conservative groups. We'll talk about it coming up.